The gunshot echoed through the mountain pass, and Olive Daniels pressed herself against the rough bark of a pine tree, heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. 3 days she had been running, 3 days since she had witnessed something she should never have seen, and now the darkness was closing in around her like a suffocating blanket, bringing with it the terror that had plagued her since childhood. It was September 1876, and the Colorado Territory mountains were unforgiving this time of year. She had left Leadville in such a hurry, clutching nothing but a small satchel and the clothes on her back. The gambling house where she had worked as a bookkeeper had seemed like honest employment until she had stayed late one evening, organizing receipts in the back office. Through the thin walls, she had heard voices, angry and threatening, followed by the unmistakable sound of violence. When she had peered through a crack in the door, she had seen Samuel Pritchard, the owner, standing over a man's body while two of his hired guns cleaned up the mess. Their eyes had met for just a second, but it was enough. She had run. Now the sun was setting behind the jagged peaks, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that would have been beautiful if Olive was not so terrified. The shadows were lengthening, reaching for her like grasping fingers, and the familiar panic was rising in her throat. Ever since she was a child, when her father had locked her in the root cellar for hours as punishment, she could not bear the darkness. The black, suffocating void brought back memories of scratching at the door until her fingers bled, screaming until her voice gave out, certain that something evil lurked just beyond her sight. She stumbled forward, her boots catching on exposed roots and loose stones. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and she had no coat, no supplies, nothing to make camp with even if she had known how. City living had not prepared her for this. The forest was growing darker by the minute, and tears stung her eyes as the panic threatened to overwhelm her completely. That was when she smelled smoke, wood smoke, drifting through the pine trees, carrying with it the promise of fire and light. Olive did not care who it might be or what danger they might pose. Nothing could be worse than being alone in the dark. She followed the scent like a lifeline, pushing through underbrush that tore at her dress and scratched her arms. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her vision tunneling as the darkness pressed in from all sides. The cabin appeared suddenly, a solid structure of rough-hewn logs nestled in a small clearing. Golden light spilled from the windows, and Olive felt a sob of relief catch in her throat. She ran the last few yards, practically falling against the heavy wooden door, pounding on it with both fists. "Please," she called out, her voice hoarse. "Please, somebody help me." The door opened so quickly she nearly fell forward. A massive hand caught her arm, steadying her, and Olive found herself looking up into the face of the largest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the entire doorway. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a strip of leather. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but she could see sharp blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His arms, bare below rolled-up sleeves, were corded with muscle, and even in her panic state, Olive noticed the raw power in his frame. What in blazes? His voice was deep, rough like gravel but not unkind. "Please," Olive repeated, unable to stop the tears now. "Please let me in. They are after me, and it is getting dark, and I cannot be in the dark." The man's eyes narrowed, and he looked past her into the forest, scanning the tree line with the practiced gaze of someone who knew how to spot danger. After a moment, he stepped back, pulling her inside with surprising gentleness given his size. "You hurt?" he asked, closing the door behind her and dropping a heavy bar across it. Olive shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. Now that she was inside in the light, the adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking and cold. The cabin was sparse but well-maintained, with a stone fireplace where flames crackled cheerfully. Furs covered the floor, and a simple bed stood against one wall. Shelves lined with supplies, tools, and what looked like trapping equipment filled the space. Everything was neat and organized, the home of a man who lived deliberately and carefully. "Sit," the man said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "You are half frozen." Olive obeyed, sinking into the chair gratefully. Her legs felt like they might give out at any moment. The man moved to a chest in the corner and pulled out a heavy blanket, which he draped around her shoulders without a word. Then he went to the fire and added another log, stirring the flames higher. "Name is Owen Keller," he said without turning around. "Been living up here about 5 years now. Trap mostly, trade furs down in Leadville once a month." He straightened and looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Now you want to tell me why you are running through my mountains at sunset, looking scared half to death." Olive clutched the blanket tighter. "My name is Olive Daniels. I worked in Leadville keeping books for Samuel Pritchard's gambling house." The name alone made her voice tremble. "3 nights ago I saw something I should not have. A man was killed and they know I saw. Pritchard sent his men after me." Owen's expression darkened. "Pritchard? That snake has been poisoning Leadville since he arrived last spring." He crossed his arms over his broad chest, making him look even more imposing. "You got anybody in town who can help you? Family?" "No one." Olive's voice broke. "My father died 2 years ago. That is why I came to Colorado to start over. I have no one." The mountain man was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the firelight. Olive knew what she must look like: bedraggled, dirty, her brown hair escaping its pins in wild tangles, her dress torn and stained. She was 22 years old and felt ancient, worn down by fear and exhaustion. "You can stay here tonight," Owen finally said. "Maybe longer, depending on how hard Pritchard's men are looking, but you need to understand something." He moved closer, crouching down so they were at eye level. This close, she could see the weathering on his face, the small scars that marked a hard life outdoors. He was probably in his late 20s, maybe 30. "These mountains are my territory. I know every trail, every pass, every hiding spot. If those men come up here, they will not find you. But you got to trust me. Can you do that?" Olive looked into his blue eyes and saw something steady there, something solid and real. In the 3 days since she had fled, she had trusted no one, had expected betrayal around every corner. But Owen Keller, this massive mountain man with his quiet confidence and gentle hands, made her feel safer than she had felt in years. "Yes," she whispered. "I can trust you." He nodded once and stood. "Good, you are hungry, I expect. Got some stew left from supper. Not fancy, but it will fill your belly." He moved to the fireplace where a pot hung over the flames and ladled thick stew into a wooden bowl. The smell made Olive's stomach cramp with hunger. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, surviving on water from streams and sheer determination. When Owen handed her the bowl and a spoon, she nearly cried again at the simple kindness of it. The stew was venison, rich and savory with chunks of potato and wild onions. It was the best thing Olive had ever tasted. She ate quickly, barely pausing to breathe, and when she finished, Owen refilled the bowl without comment. This time she ate more slowly, feeling warmth and strength returning to her body. "Thank you," she said when the bowl was finally empty. "I do not know how to repay you." "Do not worry about that now." Owen took the bowl and set it aside. "You said you cannot be in the dark, that why you were so panicked when you got here." Olive felt heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassment mixing with the lingering fear. I know it sounds foolish. A grown woman afraid of the dark like a child, but I cannot help it. Ever since I was little, the darkness makes me feel like I am suffocating, like something terrible is going to happen. Owen did not laugh or mock her. Instead, he looked thoughtful. We all got our demons. Nothing foolish about that. He glanced at the windows where full darkness had fallen. I keep a lantern burning most nights anyway. Used to the light, you can have the bed. I will sleep on the floor by the fire. I cannot take your bed, Olive protested. You can and you will. His tone left no room for argument. You've been through hell these past days. You need proper rest. He moved to a shelf and took down a tin lantern with glass sides. Inside, a candle burned steadily. I will keep this on the table by the bed. It will burn all night. You have my word. The relief that flooded through Olive was so intense it made her dizzy. You do not think I am being ridiculous. I think you are surviving the best way you know how. Owen carried the lantern to the small table beside the bed and set it down carefully. The golden light pushed back the shadows in that corner of the cabin, creating a warm circle of safety. Now get some rest. We can figure out what to do come morning. Olive stood on shaky legs and made her way to the bed. It was simple but clean, covered with thick furs that looked incredibly soft. She sat on the edge, suddenly aware of how filthy she was. I am going to ruin your blankets. They will wash. Owen was already spreading his own bedroll near the fire, moving with the efficient grace of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. Sleep, Olive Daniels. You are safe here. She believed him. Against all logic, after everything she had been through, she believed this stranger. Olive lay down on the bed, pulling the furs over herself, her eyes fixed on the lantern's steady flame. It was such a simple thing, just a candle in a tin case, but it meant everything. It meant she did not have to face the terror alone. She watched Owen settle into his bedroll, his broad back to her, giving her privacy. He was so large he barely fit in the space between the fire and the wall, but he did not complain. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. Olive stared at the lantern flame, watching it flicker and dance. For the first time in days, she felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. The darkness was still there, pressing against the windows, lurking in the corners, but the light kept it at bay. And more than that, Owen Keller kept it at bay. This mountain man who had taken her in without question, who had not mocked her fear, who had promised to keep the lantern burning all night long. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since fleeing Leadville, Olive Daniels slept without nightmares. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, sunlight streaming through the cabin windows. For a disoriented moment, Olive could not remember where she was, and then everything came rushing back. She sat up quickly, her heart racing, but Owen was at the fireplace cooking breakfast, apparently unconcerned. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee is ready if you want it." Olive pushed the furs aside and stood, automatically smoothing her ruined dress. The lantern on the bedside table was still burning, the candle worn down to a stub. He had kept his promise. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in her chest. "I slept the whole night," she said, surprised. "I never sleep the whole night. Good mountain air." Owen poured coffee into 2 tin cups and brought one to her. His hand dwarfed the cup, and she noticed again the sheer size of him, the muscles that moved under his shirt with every gesture. And being safe, that helps. She took the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. The brew was strong and black, exactly what she needed. "Do you think they are still looking for me?" "Probably." Owen returned to the fire and began loading a plate with bacon and johnnycakes. "But they will not think to look this far up the mountain. Most folks in Leadville think I am half wild, best left alone. Pritchard's men will search the roads, maybe check the other mining camps. They will not come here." He brought her the plate, and Olive ate standing up, too hungry to worry about manners. Owen fixed his own plate and sat at the rough wooden table, eating with the same quiet efficiency he seemed to apply to everything. "How long have you been alone up here?" she asked between bites. 5 years, like I said. Came out from Missouri after the war." He did not elaborate on which side he had fought for, and Olive did not ask. "Wanted quiet, wanted peace, found it up here. You do not get lonely." Owen shrugged his massive shoulders. "Sometimes, but I got the mountains, the animals. I go into town when I need supplies or company. It is enough." He looked at her directly, or it was anyway. There was something in his tone that made her pulse quicken, but Olive pushed the feeling aside. She was being ridiculous. This man had shown her kindness, nothing more. She could not read anything into it. "What do I do now?" she asked quietly. "I cannot go back to Leadville. Pritchard has too much influence there. The sheriff is in his pocket." "You could head to Denver," Owen suggested. "Big enough city that you could disappear. Start over." The thought of Denver, of the crowds and noise and inevitably the dark nights in some boarding house where no one would care about her fear, made Olive's stomach clench. "I suppose I could." Owen studied her face for a long moment. "But you do not want to." "I do not know what I want." The admission felt like defeat. "I am just so tired of running, of being afraid." "Then stay." The words hung in the air between them. Olive stared at him, sure she had misheard. "Stay here, with me." Owen set down his plate, his expression serious. "Winter is coming on. It gets harsh up here, but I got enough supplies for 2, and I know how to live off the land. You would be safe. Pritchard would never find you." "I cannot ask you to do that," Olive protested, even as hope flared in her chest. "You do not even know me. I would just be a burden." "You can cook." "Yes, of course. So, mend things." "I am very good with a needle." "Then you would not be a burden, you would be a help." Owen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountain vista beyond. "I will not lie to you, Olive. It is a hard life up here, isolated. In winter, we might not see another soul for months. But you would be safe, and you would not have to be afraid of the dark. I will keep the lanterns burning every night for as long as you need." Tears pricked Olive's eyes again, but this time they were not from fear. "Why would you do this for me?" "You do not owe me anything." Owen turned to face her, and in the morning light she could see the sincerity in his blue eyes. "Because I know what it is like to run from something. Because I got more than I need and you got nothing. Because it is the right thing to do." He paused. "And because I have not met anyone in 5 years who made me want to keep the lantern burning all night." The confession was simple, honest, and it struck Olive right in the heart. She set down her plate with shaking hands. "I do not want to be a charity case." "Then be a partner." Owen crossed the cabin in 2 long strides and stood before her. Up close, he was even more imposing, but Olive found she was not afraid. "Help me with the work around here. Keep the cabin in order. Come spring, if you want to leave, I will take you to Denver myself and give you money for a new start. But until then, you got a home here if you want it." Olive looked around the cabin, at the sturdy walls and warm fire, at the lantern still burning on the bedside table. She thought about Denver, about starting over alone in another strange city, always looking over her shoulder. And then she looked at Owen Keller, this mountain man with his gentle hands and steady presence, who had promised to keep her safe from the darkness. "I want it," she whispered. "I want to stay." Something shifted in Owen's expression, a warmth entering his eyes that had not been there before. "Good. That is good." He reached out slowly, as if afraid to spook her, and took her hand in his much larger one. His palm was calloused and rough, but his grip was gentle. "Then welcome home, Olive Daniels." The days fell into a rhythm that Olive had never experienced before. Owen was up before dawn every morning, stoking the fire and making coffee while she slept the last precious hours before sunrise. He never woke her, never complained that she was not pulling her weight. He just quietly went about his business, checking his trap lines in the mountains and hunting for fresh meat. When Olive did wake, she threw herself into making the cabin a proper home. She scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, organized the supplies with a bookkeeper's precision, and sewed new curtains from spare fabric Owen had traded for months ago. She learned to cook over the open fire, producing meals that were simple but hearty, and she mended every torn piece of clothing Owen owned, sitting by the fire with needle and thread while he worked on curing hides or repairing his traps. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their lives before this moment. Owen had been a scout during the war, he finally told her, working for the Union Army through Missouri and Arkansas. He had seen things that haunted him still, violence and cruelty that had made him crave the silence of the mountains. His parents were dead, his 3 brothers scattered to different territories, and he had not spoken to any of them in years. Olive told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about her father's drinking and cruelty, about the root cellar and the fear that had never left her. She spoke of her mother's death when she was 12, of the years spent keeping house for a father who blamed her for every misfortune. She told him about coming to Colorado after her father finally drank himself to death, hoping for a fresh start, only to end up trapped in Leadville working for a murderer. "You got rotten luck with men," Owen observed one evening as they sat by the fire after supper. "I did," Olive agreed. "Until now." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Olive felt heat rise to her face. In the 3 weeks since she had arrived, something had been building between them, something neither of them had acknowledged aloud. It was in the way Owen's hand would linger when he passed her something. In the way Olive found herself watching him work, admiring the strength in his shoulders and the competence in his movements. It was in the way he kept every lantern in the cabin burning bright as soon as the sun set, never complaining about the expense of candles, never suggesting she should just get over her fear. "Olive," Owen said quietly, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." Her heart was suddenly hammering. "What is it?" "I do not want you to leave come spring." He set down the piece of leather he had been working on and turned to face her fully. "I know I said you could go and you can if that is what you want, but I am hoping you will not want to. I am hoping you will want to stay here, with me." "Owen, let me finish." He ran a hand through his long hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I have been alone a long time. Chose to be alone because it was easier than dealing with people with all their noise and complications. But having you here, it has made me realize what I was missing. Not just having someone to talk to or share the work with. Having you specifically. The way you hum when you are cooking. The way you organize my supplies so I can actually find things. The way you are not afraid of me even though I am twice your size. I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." Olive's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" Owen stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. The firelight cast shadows across his bearded face, making him look almost fierce, but his eyes were gentle. "I am saying I am in love with you, Olive Daniels. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But I am 30 years old and I have never felt like this about anyone. You make me want to be more than just a mountain man hiding from the world. You make me want to build a life, a real life with someone." Tears spilled down Olive's cheeks. "I am afraid." "Of me?" "No, never of you." She reached out and cupped his bearded face in her hands, feeling the roughness of his skin, the solid reality of him. "I am afraid that this is too good to be true. that I will wake up and be back in that gambling house or lost in the dark forest, and you will just be a dream." Owen turned his head and pressed a kiss to her palm, and the tenderness of the gesture broke something open inside Olive. "I am real. This is real, and I will spend every day proving it to you if you let me." "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have loved you since that first night when you put the lantern by the bed and promised to keep it burning. No one has ever cared about my fear like that. No one has ever made me feel safe like you do." Owen's smile was brilliant, transforming his stern face into something beautiful. He stood and pulled her up with him, and then his arms were around her, crushing her against his massive chest. Olive buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the scent of pine and wood smoke and something uniquely him. His heart thundered under her ear, as fast as her own. "Marry me," Owen said into her hair. "We can go down to Leadville, find a preacher. I will keep you safe. Pritchard will not dare try anything with me standing beside you." Olive pulled back enough to look up at him. "You would do that, risk going back to town?" "I would do anything for you." He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "I love you, Olive. I want you as my wife. I want to spend every night for the rest of my life keeping the lanterns burning so you feel safe. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Will you marry me?" She thought about all the years she had been alone, all the fear and running and darkness. And then she thought about the life Owen was offering her, rough and isolated perhaps, but filled with safety and love and light. It was not even a difficult choice. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Keller." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Olive had imagined her first kiss would be. It was not tentative or awkward. It was sure and strong, like everything else about Owen, and it sent heat flooding through her body. His hands were gentle on her face, cradling her as if she were something precious and fragile, even though his kiss was deep and passionate. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "We should go tomorrow," Owen said, "before I lose my nerve about going back to town, before winter sets in too hard." "Tomorrow," Olive agreed. She felt giddy, almost drunk on happiness. "Owen, I cannot believe this is happening." "Believe it." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "You are mine now and I am yours. Nothing is going to change that." That night, Owen set up 3 lanterns around the cabin, filling the space with golden light. They sat together by the fire, Olive curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders. They talked about the future, about what their life would look like. Owen wanted to build an addition to the cabin come spring, make more room. Maybe put in a real window with glass instead of the oiled parchment he had now. Olive talked about planting a garden, about keeping chickens, about all the small domestic touches that would make the cabin feel like a real home. "Will you miss town life?" Owen asked. "The society, the shops, all of that?" "No." Olive was surprised by how certain she felt. "I was never happy in town, always trying to be someone I was not, always afraid. Here I can just be myself. With you I can just be myself. Good." Owen pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Because I aim to keep you here forever." They left at first light the next morning, Owen armed with his rifle and a pistol at his hip. The ride down the mountain took several hours, and with every mile, Olive felt her anxiety growing. What if someone saw her? What if Pritchard's men were still looking? "Stay close," Owen murmured as they approached the outskirts of Leadville. "If anyone gives us trouble, you get behind me and let me handle it." Leadville was bustling with mid-morning activity. Miners heading to and from the silver mines that had sprung up all around the area, merchants hawking their wares, women in their finest dresses parading down the wooden sidewalks. Olive kept her head down, her hair hidden under a bonnet Owen had procured from somewhere in his supplies, but she felt exposed, certain that every eye was on her. Owen seemed to sense her fear. He rode close enough that their legs brushed, a solid and constant presence. His hand never strayed far from his rifle, and his eyes were constantly scanning the street. They found the church on the edge of town, a simple white painted building with a cross on the steeple. The minister, a thin man named Reverend Hayward, looked surprised to see them but welcomed them inside. "We want to be married," Owen said without preamble. "Today, if possible." Reverend Hayward looked between them, taking in Owen's rough clothing and Olive's worn dress. "Do you have witnesses?" "We will find some," Owen said. "Whatever you need, we will make it happen." The Reverend nodded slowly. "Very well. Let me gather my wife. She can serve as one witness. You will need to find one more." They found their second witness at the general store next door, the shopkeeper's wife, who was delighted to be part of a wedding and asked no awkward questions. Within an hour, they were standing in the small church, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, making promises to each other before God and these strangers. Owen's hands were steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto Olive's finger. He had bought it at the general store while she waited in the church, and though it was not fancy, it was the most beautiful thing Olive had ever seen. "I, Owen Keller, take you, Olive Daniels, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his deep voice filling the small space. "I promise to love you, protect you, and keep you safe from the darkness for all the days of my life." Olive's voice shook as she repeated her own vows, but the words came from her heart. "I, Olive Daniels, take you, Owen Keller, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, stand beside you, and make a home with you for all the days of my life." When Reverend Hayward pronounced them man and wife, Owen cupped Olive's face in his large hands and kissed her with such tenderness that she forgot they were in a church, forgot the witnesses watching, forgot everything except the feeling of being loved and cherished. They signed the marriage certificate, Owen's signature bold and surprisingly elegant for a mountain man, Olive's hand shaking only slightly as she wrote her new name, Olive Keller. It looked right, felt right, like something that had always been meant to be. "Congratulations," Reverend Hayward said warmly. "May God bless your union with many years of happiness." They were hurrying out of the church, Owen eager to get back to the mountain before dark, when a voice called out behind them. "Well, well, if it is not Miss Daniels." Olive's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. She turned slowly to see Samuel Pritchard standing on the church steps, flanked by two of his hired guns. He was a handsome man, she supposed, with slicked-back dark hair and expensive clothes, but there was something reptilian in his cold eyes. "You have been hard to find, Miss Daniels," Pritchard said, descending the steps slowly. "I have had men looking for you for weeks." Owen moved in front of Olive, his hand on his pistol. "The lady is my wife now. She has got nothing to say to you." Pritchard's eyes flicked to Owen, assessing him. She saw the moment he registered the mountain man's size, the competence in the way he held himself. "Your wife? How charming! Unfortunately, she witnessed a crime. I cannot have her running around telling tales." "I have not told anyone anything," Olive said, hating the tremor in her voice. "And I will not. I just want to be left alone." "I wish I could believe that." Pritchard smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "But you see, loose ends make me nervous, and you, my dear, are a very loose end." "She is not going anywhere with you," Owen said flatly. His voice was calm, but Olive could feel the coiled tension in him, like a predator ready to strike. "And if you or your men try to touch her, I will kill all three of you where you stand." One of Pritchard's men laughed. Big words from a mountain man. Owen's hand moved so fast Olive almost missed it. In one fluid motion, he drew his pistol and fired, the bullet striking the wooden post right next to the laughing man's head. The gunshot echoed through the street, and suddenly, everyone was staring at them. "Next one goes between your eyes," Owen said quietly. "Your choice." The laughter died. Pritchard's men both took an involuntary step back, their hands away from their weapons. Pritchard himself had gone pale, his smooth confidence cracking. "You cannot shoot us all in broad daylight," Pritchard tried. The sheriff is your man, I know." Owen's smile was cold. "But there are 20 witnesses on this street right now who just saw you threaten my wife. You pull a gun, and I will kill you in self-defense, and every person here will swear to it." He raised his voice slightly. "Is not that right, folks?" There was a murmur of agreement from the gathered crowd. Olive realized with a start that people had emerged from shops and homes, drawn by the commotion, and they were on Owen's side. Pritchard might have the sheriff in his pocket, but he was not well liked, and Owen was known as an honest man, if a reclusive one. Pritchard seemed to realize he was outmaneuvered. His jaw clenched, and for a moment Olive thought he might try something anyway. But then he stepped back, straightening his jacket. "This is not over," he said coldly. "Yes, it is." Owen's voice was hard as stone. "My wife and I are leaving Leadville. We live up in the mountains where your men cannot find us and will not be foolish enough to try. You leave us alone and we will leave you alone. You come after us, and I promise you will not come back down the mountain. Do we have an understanding?" The two men stared at each other, and Olive held her breath. Finally, Pritchard nodded once, a sharp, angry gesture. "Fine. But if I ever see either of you in Leadville again, you will not," Owen interrupted. "We have got no reason to come back. Now get out of my sight before I change my mind about letting you walk away." Pritchard turned on his heel and stalked off, his men following. Owen did not lower his pistol until they had disappeared around a corner. Only then did he holster the weapon and turn to Olive, his expression softening. "You all right?" she nodded, though she was shaking. "That was the bravest thing I have ever seen." "That was the most terrifying thing I have ever done," Owen admitted. "But I meant what I said. No one is going to hurt you, not while I am breathing." They left Leadville within the hour, riding hard for the mountain. Owen kept checking behind them, but no one followed. As they climbed higher, leaving the town far below, Olive felt the last of her fear draining away. Pritchard would not come after them. He was a bully and a coward, and Owen had called his bluff perfectly. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Owen dismounted and helped Olive down, his hands lingering on her waist. "Welcome home, Mrs. Keller," he said, and the name sent a thrill through her. "Mrs. Keller," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Owen carried her over the threshold, a tradition he had remembered from somewhere, and set her down gently in the middle of the cabin. Then he set about lighting every lantern they owned, filling the space with warm, golden light. "Our wedding night," he said when the last lantern was lit. "I want it to be perfect." Olive's heart was racing, but not with fear. "It already is." He came to her then, his movements slow and deliberate, giving her every chance to pull away. But Olive did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted everything that marriage to Owen Keller would mean. He kissed her deeply, his hands tangling in her hair, and Olive melted against him. His touch was both gentle and possessive, worshipful and hungry. He made her feel precious and desired all at once, and when he finally lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed, she was ready. The lanterns burned bright around them, keeping the darkness at bay, as Owen made love to his wife for the first time. He was careful with her, mindful of his size and strength, murmuring words of love and encouragement. Olive clung to him, overwhelmed by sensation and emotion, by the sheer rightness of being with him like this. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the furs, Olive's head on Owen's broad chest, his arm around her. She could hear his heart beating steady and strong beneath her ear. "I never knew it could be like that," she whispered. "I never knew I could feel so safe and so alive at the same time." Owen pressed a kiss to her hair. "It is only going to get better, I promise you. We have got our whole lives ahead of us now." She tilted her head back to look at him. "Thank you for keeping the lanterns burning." "Always," he said seriously. "Every night for the rest of our lives, if that is what you need. I am never going to let the darkness take you, Olive. You are too precious to me." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its pack. But inside the cabin, with the lanterns burning bright and Owen's arms around her, Olive Keller felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. Winter came to the Colorado mountains with a vengeance. Snow piled high around the cabin, drifts reaching halfway up the walls. The wind howled like a living thing, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in its buckets overnight. But inside the cabin, Olive and Owen were warm and content. Owen had been right about how hard life in the mountains could be. There were days when he could not check his trap lines because of whiteout conditions, days when they had to ration their supplies carefully, unsure how long the storm would last. But there were also long, quiet evenings by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, talking and laughing and making love while the lanterns burned bright around them. Olive discovered she was stronger than she had ever thought possible. She learned to help Owen with the heavier chores, hauling water and wood, tending to his horse and the mule they used for packing. She learned to read the sky and the wind, to predict when a storm was coming. She learned to shoot Owen's rifle, though she was not nearly as good as he was, and she learned which plants and roots could be used for medicine. In return, Owen learned to appreciate the small domestic comforts Olive brought to his life. Fresh bread instead of Johnny cakes. Clothes that were mended before they fell apart. A cabin that smelled of beeswax and herbs instead of just wood smoke and animal pelts. And every night, without fail, he lit all the lanterns as soon as the sun began to set, keeping his promise to never let the darkness frighten her. By January, Olive realized her monthly courses had not come. She kept quiet about it for a few weeks, wanting to be sure before she said anything. But as February arrived and her body began to change in subtle ways, she knew she had to tell Owen. She chose a night when the weather was calm, the sky clear and filled with stars. They had just finished supper, and Owen was working on a new trap while Olive did the mending. The fire crackled cheerfully, and all 5 lanterns filled the cabin with golden light. "Owen," she said, setting down her needle, "I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, always attuned to any shift in her mood. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right." She could not help the smile that spread across her face. "I am expecting a baby." "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Owen just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he dropped the trap he had been working on and crossed the cabin in 2 long strides, pulling her into his arms and lifting her clean off her feet. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Olive laughed, holding tight to his broad shoulders. "Sometime in late summer, I think. Are you happy?" "Happy." Owen set her down carefully, as if she were made of glass, and cupped her face in his hands. His eyes were suspiciously bright. "Olive, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and amazed all at once. We are going to be parents." He kissed her then, tenderly, and when he pulled back, there were tears on his cheeks. Olive had never seen him cry before, and the sight of this strong, stoic man brought to tears by joy made her own eyes fill. "I will take care of you," Owen promised. "Both of you. I will make sure you have everything you need." "I know you will." Olive kissed him again. "You are going to be a wonderful father, Owen. Our child is so lucky to have you." From that moment on, Owen treated Olive like she was made of spun glass. He would not let her lift anything heavy, would not let her go outside when the cold was too bitter. He made her eat extra portions at every meal, determined that she and the baby would be well nourished. It would have been suffocating if it had not come from such obvious love and care. As her belly began to swell, Owen would spend hours with his hand pressed against it, feeling for the baby's movements. The first time he felt a kick, his face lit up with such wonder that Olive fell in love with him all over again. "He is strong," Owen said, his hand spread across her stomach. "Or she is. Either way, this child is going to be a fighter." "Just like their father," Olive said softly. By April, the snow was beginning to melt, and Owen made his first trip down to Leadville since their wedding. Olive had tried to convince him not to go, worried about Pritchard, but they needed supplies she could not do without. Salt, sugar, fabric for baby clothes, and most importantly, anything the doctor recommended for childbirth. Owen was gone for 2 full days, and Olive spent every minute worrying. She kept all the lanterns burning even during the day, unable to shake the feeling that something might happen. But on the afternoon of the second day, she heard the familiar sound of hooves and rushed to the door to see Owen riding up the trail, the mule laden with supplies. He swept her into his arms the moment he dismounted, holding her tight despite her protests that she was too big and heavy. "Everything went fine," he assured her. "Pritchard was not even in town. Word is he moved his operation to Denver after some trouble with the law. We do not have to worry about him anymore." The relief was immense. Olive had not realized how much that lingering fear had weighed on her until it was gone. They were truly safe now, truly free to build their life without looking over their shoulders. Owen unpacked the supplies, showing her everything he had bought. Soft cotton fabric in white and yellow, perfect for baby gowns. A cradle that a carpenter in town had made, simple but sturdy. Books about childbirth and infant care that Owen had sought out from the doctor. And perhaps most touching, a stuffed rabbit made of worn velvet that Owen had bought from a peddler. "For the baby," he said, almost shyly. "I know it is silly, but I thought." Olive cut him off with a kiss. "It is perfect. Everything is perfect." As spring turned to summer, Olive's belly grew round and full. The baby was active, kicking and squirming, and sometimes Owen would lie with his head on her stomach, talking to their child. He told stories of the mountains, of the animals he had seen, of the life they would all share together. Olive would run her fingers through his long hair, marveling at how much her life had changed in less than a year. She no longer feared the dark the way she once had. Oh, the lanterns still burned every night, and she was grateful for them. But with Owen beside her, the darkness held less power. She had something stronger than light to keep her safe now. She had love in early August as the mountains bloomed with wildflowers and the days stretched long and warm. Olive went into labor. Owen, for all his competence and strength, looked terrified. "Tell me what to do," he said, his face pale. "I have read the books, but Olive, I am scared. I know." She squeezed his hand through a contraction. "So am I, but we can do this together." The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Owen stayed by her side every moment, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, helping her walk when the midwife book said movement would help. He never faltered, never showed anything but love and encouragement, even though Olive could see the fear in his eyes. As evening approached and the light began to fade, Olive felt a moment of panic about the coming darkness. But Owen had already thought of it. He had lit every lantern they owned, plus half a dozen candles, turning the cabin into a blaze of light. No shadows could reach her here, not with Owen keeping watch. Just as the sun was setting with one final agonizing push, their baby entered the world. The cry was thin and reedy at first, then stronger, filling the cabin with sound. Owen cut the cord with shaking hands and wrapped the baby in a soft blanket before placing the infant in Olive's arms. "A boy," he said, his voice choked with tears. "We have a son, Olive." She looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature in her arms and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it nearly hurt. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn blue like his father's. 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes, all accounted for. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Owen sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Olive, staring at their son with an expression of absolute wonder. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months, but had never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son in the lantern light with his father's strong arm around them both, Olive knew exactly what his name should be. "August," she said, "for the month he was born and because it means magnificent." "August Owen Keller." "August," Owen repeated, testing the name. Then he smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed his face. "It is perfect. He is perfect." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead, then to Olive's lips. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me a family." "Thank you for keeping the lanterns burning," Olive replied. "Thank you for making me feel safe enough to have all of this." They sat together in the golden light, the small family complete at last, while outside the mountain night settled in around their cabin. But inside, the lanterns burned bright, and there was no darkness, only love and light and the promise of a future together. August was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to inherit his father's size and his mother's disposition. He slept well, ate well, and within a few months was smiling and cooing at everything around him. Owen was utterly besotted with his son. He would carry the baby everywhere, this tiny infant cradled in his massive arms, talking to him constantly. "See that, August? That is a deer track. When you are older, I will teach you to follow them." Or, "This is a pine tree. Smell that. That is what home smells like." Olive would watch them together, her heart full to bursting. This was everything she had never known she wanted. A man who loved her completely, a child who was healthy and thriving, a home in the mountains where she felt safe and cherished. The darkness still came every night, but Owen still lit the lanterns without fail, and Olive no longer felt the same paralyzing fear. She had too much light in her life now for the darkness to take hold. As August grew into a toddler, sturdy and adventurous, Owen built the addition to the cabin he had promised. 2 new rooms, one for sleeping and one for storage, with real glass windows that he had hauled up the mountain at great expense. The cabin became a real house, comfortable and solid. They talked about more children, and Olive found she wanted them. She wanted a large family, wanted to fill the house with love and laughter and light. When she told Owen this, he grinned and pulled her close. "I think we can make that happen," he said, kissing her neck. "In fact, I think we should start working on it right away." Their second child came 2 years after August, a daughter they named Lily. She had Olive's brown hair and Owen's blue eyes, and she was fearless from the start, crawling toward danger with a determination that kept her parents constantly on their toes. August adored his little sister, and Owen was wrapped around her tiny finger from the first moment. "I thought I loved August as much as it was possible to love a child," Owen confessed one night, watching Lily sleep in her cradle. "But somehow there is more. My heart just keeps expanding." Olive understood completely. She felt the same way. Each child brought more love, not less, more joy, not less. The cabin rang with children's laughter now, with the sounds of play and growth and life. 2 years after Lily came their third child, another son they named Thomas. He was quieter than his siblings, thoughtful and careful, content to sit and watch the world around him. Owen joked that Thomas was a future trapper, patient and observant, and through it all, every single night, Owen lit the lanterns. Even when he was exhausted from chasing toddlers and caring for infants, even when they ran low on candles and had to ration carefully until he could make the long trip to Leadville for more, he kept his promise. The darkness never came for Olive because Owen never let it. The children grew and thrived in the mountain wilderness. August, at 6 years old, could track a rabbit and knew the names of every tree and plant for miles around. Lily, at 4, could outrun her older brother and had a talent for climbing that gave Olive heart palpitations. Thomas, at 2, was already showing his father's quiet competence, watching everything and learning. Olive had never been happier. She had never imagined in those dark days when she was fleeing through the mountains, terrified and alone, that this life was possible. That she could have a husband who loved her so completely, children who were healthy and happy, a home that was truly hers. That the fear that had controlled her whole life could be held at bay by something as simple as lantern light and a man who cared enough to keep it burning. One night, after the children were all asleep, Olive and Owen sat together by the fire as they had done countless times before. Owen's arm was around her shoulders and she was tucked against his side, perfectly content. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Taking me in that night? Giving up your solitude for this noisy, chaotic life?" Owen looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret it? Olive, marrying you is the best thing I ever did. This life we have built together, our children, this home, it is everything I never knew I needed. You gave me purpose, gave me love, gave me a family. How could I regret that? I just worry sometimes that I trapped you," she admitted. "That you would have been happier alone in your mountains." Owen turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Listen to me, Olive Keller. Before you, I was not living. I was just existing, hiding from the world and calling it peace. You taught me what it means to really live, to love and be loved, to have something worth protecting. Every single day with you is a gift. Every moment with our children is a blessing. I would not change a single thing." Tears pricked Olive's eyes. Not even the lanterns. It must be exhausting, keeping them all lit every night after all these years. Not even the lanterns. Owen cupped her face in his hands, those same rough, gentle hands that had steadied her that first terrifying night. "You know what those lanterns mean to me. They are not a burden, Olive. They are a reminder every single night of why I am here, who I am doing this for. When I light those lanterns, I am telling you with actions what my words can never fully express. That I love you, that I will protect you, that no darkness will ever touch you while I am breathing. It is not exhausting. It is a privilege." Olive kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. After all these years, his kisses still made her heart race, still made her feel cherished and desired. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I will love you until the day I die, Owen Keller." "And I will love you beyond that," he replied. "Into whatever comes after. You are mine and I am yours forever." They made love that night in front of the fire, quietly so as not to wake the children, and afterward lay tangled together in the blankets, watching the flames dance. The lanterns burned bright around them, as they always did, keeping the darkness at bay. The years continued to pass, marked by the turning of seasons and the growth of their children. August became a skilled hunter and tracker, often accompanying Owen on his longer trips into the mountains. Lily became Olive's helper, learning to cook and sew and tend the garden they had expanded over the years. Thomas showed a talent for woodworking, making small carved animals that delighted his younger siblings. Because yes, there were younger siblings. Olive and Owen's family continued to grow. A fourth child, another daughter named Rose, came when August was 8. Then twin boys, James and Jacob, when Lily was 7. The cabin had to be expanded twice more to accommodate everyone, until it was less a cabin and more a small compound, with multiple buildings clustered together in their mountain clearing. Owen joked that he was building his own town, but Olive could see the pride in his eyes when he looked at what they had created together. This was their legacy, this home and these children. This was proof that two broken people could find each other and build something beautiful. Not that life was always easy. There were illnesses that terrified them both, feverish nights spent nursing sick children while praying they would see morning. There was the year the winter came early and lasted late, and they nearly ran out of food before spring arrived. There was the time a bear got into their supplies and Owen had to drive it off, suffering deep claw marks on his arm that left scars. But through it all, they had each other. And every night, no matter what challenges they faced, Owen lit the lanterns. It became a ritual their children understood was important, though they did not know the full story. They just knew that Papa lit the lanterns every evening and Mama smiled when he did, and that was how things were. As Olive approached 40, she and Owen decided their family was complete. 6 children were more than enough, they agreed, and though Olive loved being a mother, she was also ready to move into the next phase of their life. The older children were becoming more independent, and soon August would be old enough to start his own life if he chose. "Do you think they will all stay on the mountain?" Olive asked Owen one evening as they watched their brood play in the clearing. August at 15 was nearly as tall as his father now, broad-shouldered and strong. Lily at 13 was beautiful and fierce, unafraid of anything. The others ranged down to the twins at 5, wild little boys who were constantly getting into trouble. "Some might," Owen said thoughtfully. "August loves the mountains like I do. I think he will want to trap and hunt, maybe build his own cabin nearby. But Lily, I think she is going to want to see more of the world. She has got a restless spirit." "She gets that from you," Olive teased. "She gets that from both of us." Owen pulled her close. "We were both runners once, remember, looking for something better. She might need to run too before she finds her way home." The thought of any of their children leaving was bittersweet, but Olive knew Owen was right. They had raised them to be strong and independent, to think for themselves. They could not expect them all to stay forever. But for now, they were all still here, all still together. And that was enough. On the night of Olive and Owen's 20th anniversary, he surprised her. The children were all in bed, though the older ones were probably still awake, whispering together as siblings do. Owen led Olive outside into the summer night, and she gasped at what she saw. He had strung lanterns all around the clearing, dozens of them, hanging from tree branches and posts he must have set up while she was busy with the children. The effect was magical, like stars brought down to earth, bathing everything in golden light. "Owen," she breathed, "it is beautiful. Not as beautiful as you." He took her hand and led her into the center of the clearing. 20 years ago, you stumbled out of the forest and into my life. You were terrified and brave and more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. I fell in love with you that first night, even though I did not know it yet, and every day since has been a gift. "You fell in love with me that first night?" Olive asked, surprised. "I did." Owen smiled, that soft smile he reserved just for her. When you asked me if I thought you were being ridiculous about the dark, and I said no. When I saw the relief on your face, when I realized I could give you that small comfort, something shifted in me. I did not understand it then, but looking back, that was the moment. That was when I knew you were going to change everything. Tears spilled down Olive's cheeks. I fell in love with you then too, when you promised to keep the lantern burning all night. No one had ever cared about my fear like that. No one had ever made me feel like I mattered. Owen pulled her into his arms, and they swayed together in the lantern light, dancing to music only they could hear. Around them, the mountains rose dark and majestic against the star-filled sky, but in their clearing, there was only light and love. 20 more years, Owen murmured into her hair. And 20 after that if we are blessed with them. I will keep the lanterns burning as long as you need them, Olive, as long as I draw breath. I know you will. Olive looked up at him, at the face she knew as well as her own, weathered now with age but still strong, still beautiful to her. You are the light, Owen. The lanterns are just symbols. You are what keeps the darkness away. You are what saved me. We saved each other, he corrected gently. I was lost before you, Olive. Living but not alive. You gave me purpose, gave me joy, gave me a reason to be more than just a man hiding in the mountains. They kissed under the lantern light, surrounded by the home they had built and the family they had created, and Olive felt nothing but profound gratitude for the path that had led her here, for the fear that had driven her into the mountains that night, for the courage that had made her knock on a stranger's door, for the love that had bloomed in the most unlikely of places. The years continued their steady march. August did indeed build his own cabin a few miles away, taking a wife from Leadville, a quiet girl named Sarah who adapted to mountain life with the same determination Olive had shown. They gave Owen and Olive their first grandchild, a boy they named Owen after his grandfather, and Olive thought her husband might burst with pride. Lily, as predicted, left for Denver at 18, determined to see the world. She wrote letters regularly, telling them of her adventures, of the job she had found teaching school, of the gentleman who was courting her. She promised to come home for visits, and she kept that promise, returning every summer with new stories and new experiences to share. The other children found their own paths. Thomas became a carpenter, his skills in high demand as more people settled in the mountains. Rose married a rancher and moved to the lower valleys. The twins, inseparable as always, decided to try their hand at mining, heading to a new silver strike in the next territory over. But they all came home for holidays and important occasions, filling the house with noise and laughter and love. And every time they came, they found Papa lighting the lanterns every evening, keeping the darkness at bay for Mama, just as he always had. "Do you ever wonder," Lily asked her mother during one visit, "what your life would have been like if you had not run that night? If you had stayed in Leadville?" Olive looked around at her family, at Owen holding his grandson, at her children and their spouses, and the growing number of grandchildren. She thought about the life she had built, about the love she had found, about the fear she had conquered. "I would have died," she said simply. "Maybe not right away, but eventually. The fear would have killed me, or Pritchard would have, or I would have just faded away into nothing. Running that night saved my life. Finding your father gave me a life worth living." "He still lights the lanterns every night," Lily observed. "Even though you have gotten better about the dark over the years, I have seen you go outside at night sometimes, Mama." "I know." Olive smiled. "I do not need them the way I once did. But he does it anyway, and I let him because it is his way of saying he loves me. It is our ritual, our connection. Why would I want to take that away?" Lily hugged her mother tight. "I hope I find someone who loves me the way Papa loves you." "You will," Olive assured her. When the time is right, you will. And she did. They all did eventually. All 6 of Olive and Owen's children found partners who loved them, who built lives with them, who gave them children of their own. The family tree spread and grew, branches reaching out in all directions, but the roots remained firmly planted in the Colorado mountains, in the cabin where it all began. Owen and Olive grew old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies becoming less spry, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, tempered by shared experiences and mutual respect, and a deep, abiding affection that needed no words. On their 50th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration at the main house. 3 generations gathered together, filling every room with noise and chaos and joy. Owen, now 75 but still strong despite his years, stood with Olive and looked at what they had created. 50 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Half a century since you knocked on my door, scared and desperate and so damned brave. 50 years since you took me in, Olive replied, leaning into his side. She was 72 now, her body worn from years of hard work and childbearing, but she still felt young when she was with Owen. Since you promised to keep the lanterns burning, and I have kept that promise. Owen gestured around the house where lanterns burned bright despite the mid-afternoon sun. He had lit them specially for the party, making sure every shadow was banished, every single night for 50 years. I know. Olive stood on tiptoe and kissed his bearded cheek, and I have loved you more with each passing day. Their grandson, the first Owen, now a young man himself, overheard them. Grandpa, why do you really light all those lanterns every night? Grandma does not seem as afraid anymore. Owen looked at the young man, seeing so much of himself in those features. Because I made her a promise, and a man keeps his promises. Because it is a small thing that brings her comfort, and why would I not do it? But mostly because every time I light those lanterns, I am reminded of how lucky I am. Of the miracle that brought your grandmother into my life. The darkness is not the enemy, boy. Forgetting what matters is the enemy. Those lanterns make sure I never forget. Young Owen nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. That is really romantic, Grandpa. Your grandma is worth the romance, Owen said firmly. Do not you ever forget that. If you are lucky enough to find a woman worth keeping the lanterns lit for, you do it, and you do not complain. The party continued long into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than any of them could eat. Olive danced with Owen, with her sons, with her grandsons. She laughed with her daughters and daughters-in-law, held squirming great-grandchildren, and felt blessed beyond measure. As the sun set and the guests began to leave or settle in for the night in various rooms and outbuildings, Owen made his rounds. Just as he had done for 50 years, he lit every lantern in the house, in the barn, in the outbuildings. He moved slowly now, his movements careful, but he did not skip a single one. Olive watched him from the window, her heart full. This man, this beautiful, stubborn, loving man, had kept his promise for half a century. He had loved her through fear and joy, through hardship and celebration, through the births of their children and the deaths of friends. He had never wavered, never complained, never made her feel like a burden. When he came back inside, she was waiting for him. Come to bed, my love. You have had a long day. Best day of my life, Owen said, but he let her lead him to their bedroom. Except for the day we met, and our wedding day, and the days our children were born. And there have been a lot of best days, Olive interrupted, laughing. That means we have had a good life. The best, Owen agreed. They lay down together in the bed they had shared for 50 years, surrounded by the golden glow of lantern light. Owen's arm came around Olive, pulling her close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Owen," she whispered into the quiet, "thank you for everything, for loving me, for keeping me safe, for building this life with me. I could not have asked for a better partner, a better husband, a better father for my children." "The privilege was mine," Owen said quietly. His hand stroked her hair, gentle and soothing. "You were the making of me, Olive Keller. Everything good in my life came from you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by light and love. And when morning came, they woke together, ready to face whatever the day might bring, secure in the knowledge that they faced it together. Their last years were peaceful. They moved less quickly, tired more easily, but they were content. Their children checked on them regularly, grandchildren visited often, and there was always someone around to help with the heavier chores. But Owen still insisted on lighting the lanterns every night, and Olive still smiled when he did. When Owen passed away at the age of 83, it was in his sleep, peacefully with Olive beside him. She woke to find him gone, and though grief threatened to overwhelm her, there was also a sense of gratitude. He had lived a long, full life. He had been loved and had loved in return. He had died in his own bed in the home he had built, surrounded by evidence of a life well lived. The funeral was attended by over 100 people, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, neighbors, and friends from all over the territory. They buried him on the mountain he had loved, in a spot with a clear view of the cabin and the valley below. Olive stood beside the grave, her children surrounding her, and said her final goodbye to the man who had been her everything. That night, alone in the cabin for the first time in 55 years, Olive considered leaving the lanterns unlit. She had conquered her fear of the dark long ago. She did not need them anymore. But then she thought of Owen, of his hands carefully lighting each one, of the love and devotion that simple act represented. And she knew what she had to do. Moving slowly, her old hands shaking slightly, Olive lit every lantern in the house. She did it the way Owen had always done it, methodically and carefully, making sure each flame was steady before moving to the next. When she was done, the cabin blazed with light, just as it had every night for over half a century. Olive sat in Owen's chair by the fire and looked around at the lanterns. "I kept them burning for you, my love," she whispered to the empty room. "Just this once, I kept them burning for you." And she could have sworn she felt his presence there with her, warm and comforting, as real as it had been in life. The darkness could not touch her, because Owen never truly left. His love remained, burning bright in every corner of the cabin, in every memory, in every beat of her heart. Olive lived another 5 years after Owen's death, surrounded by family, cherished and cared for by the children they had raised together. She told stories about their father to the grandchildren, about the mountain man who had taken in a frightened woman and promised to keep the lanterns burning, about the love that had grown between them, wild and fierce and true. And every night, without fail, one of her children or grandchildren would come and light the lanterns. It became their way of honoring both their parents, of keeping alive the tradition that had meant so much. The lanterns burned bright, keeping the darkness at bay, just as Owen had always done. When Olive finally passed away at the age of 82, surrounded by her children, her last words were of Owen. "Keep the lanterns burning," she whispered. "Do not let the darkness win." They buried her beside Owen on the mountain, and at the reception afterward, August stood before the gathered family and spoke. "Our parents taught us many things," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But the most important lesson was about love. Real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond. Papa showed us that love is not just words or feelings. It is actions, repeated day after day, year after year. It is keeping the lanterns burning even when you are tired, even when it seems unnecessary, because you made a promise to someone you love. He looked around at his siblings, at the next generations who filled the room. Mama and Papa are together now, wherever they are. And I like to think there are lanterns burning there too, keeping the darkness away, just like always. That night, in homes scattered across Colorado and beyond, every single member of Owen and Olive's family lit a lantern. They did it in memory, in tribute, in honor of a love story that had begun with fear and darkness and had bloomed into light and joy and an ever-growing family. The main cabin on the mountain was kept in the family, passed down through the generations. And every resident, every visitor, knew the story. They knew about Olive, who was afraid of the dark, and Owen, who had kept the lanterns burning for her. They knew about a love that had conquered fear, about a promise kept for over 50 years, about two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. And on certain nights, visitors to the cabin swore they could see extra lights in the windows, more lanterns than anyone had lit. They said it was the spirits of Owen and Olive, still together, still keeping the darkness at bay with the power of their love. Whether that was true or not, the family chose to believe it, because some love stories do not end with death. Some love stories burn eternal, bright as lantern light, keeping the darkness away for generations to come. And in the mountains of Colorado, in a sturdy cabin built by loving hands, the lanterns still burn every night, a testament to a promise kept, to a fear conquered, to a love that would never, ever die. The end.